Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we are diving into something huge, Sven Beckert's 1,000-page History of Capitalism. And let me tell you, this isn't just any history book. It has sparked a massive debate by basically trying to flip the entire story we think we know about the system that runs our world.
You know, this famous quote really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? Capitalism can feel so permanent, so natural, like gravity or the weather. It's just the way things are. But what if that's not true? What if the whole thing is actually a pretty recent and very specific human invention?
And that right there is the core argument of Beckert's book. This is a massive, deeply researched attempt to completely reframe how we see capitalism's origins. And it's caused a major intellectual clash. We're not just talking about a new history here. Beckert is trying for a radical rewriting of the entire code.
Okay, so let's get into it. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at this radical new history. Then, we'll explore this idea of capitalism's violent birth. We'll dissect the so-called myth of free markets, weigh the debate between sticks versus carrots, and finally, we'll look at the final verdict. So, first things first, what is capitalism according to this new telling? It sounds like a simple question, right? But the answer here is actually the key to understanding this entire debate. For Beckert, it's not really about free markets, or democracy, or innovation. No, he says it all boils down to one simple, powerful logic, a relentless, unstoppable drive for the ceaseless accumulation of privately controlled capital. This paints capitalism less like a set of rules and more like a living, breathing process that can never, ever get enough.
And this slide just lays out the two competing stories perfectly. On one hand, you have the traditional story we all kind of know. Capitalism grew out of the European Enlightenment, democracy, free markets, all that good stuff. But Beckert's version is completely different. He says it grew from power, violence, and the state, that it wasn't just European, it was global from day one, and that it was never natural or inevitable. It has always been unstable and fiercely contested.
And that darker story leads us directly to maybe the most controversial part of his argument. He claims capitalism's early phase wasn't about peaceful merchants making deals. No, it was an era he calls war capitalism, where global trade and brute military force were basically the same thing. So he says, forget London or Amsterdam, the real engine room of early capitalism was somewhere else entirely. He points to places like Potosi, in what's now Bolivia, which produced 60% of the world's silver, with such brutal forced labor that it was known as the mountain that eats men. Or you have the sugar plantations in Barbados, a private slave colony that, as he puts it, used American lands, African labor, and European capital to become a horrifyingly efficient prototype for a new kind of global industry. All right, so this whole idea of state-backed violence leads us to another huge battleground in this debate. And it's about something we all think we know and probably take for granted, the very idea of the free market.
I mean, that is a pretty bold statement, right? Beckert's whole point here is that the state wasn't some neutral referee standing on the sidelines. Far from it. He argues the state was an essential partner, an active player even, using its armies, its navies, and its laws to create and enforce the rules of a global game that was rigged from the start.
But here's where it gets really fascinating. The critics turn this around and say, hey, you know who kind of agrees with you on that point? The father of capitalism himself, Adam Smith. They point out that Smith saw the brutal slave plantation system not as an example of a free market, but as its exact opposite, a violent, inefficient, state-backed monopoly that actually violated true market principles.
So when you boil it all down, the entire debate really comes down to this one crucial question. What was the real engine behind capitalism's explosive growth? Was it the stick of coercion, or was it the carrot of prosperity?
This slide just spells it out perfectly. On one side, Beckert focuses on the sticks. He argues that things like slavery and coerced labor weren't just unfortunate side effects of capitalism, they were absolutely essential to building it. But on the other side, his critics say he's completely ignoring the carrots, the undeniable explosion in wealth, higher living standards, and innovations that the system also produced.
And to really understand the scale of these sticks, Beckert hits you with this number. Before the year 1760, European traders transported 4.38 million enslaved Africans to the Americas. That is more than double the number of Europeans who migrated over during that same time. It's a staggering figure that really underscores how central forced labor was to this whole enterprise.
But critics fire back hard with this charge. They basically accuse Beckert of a massive oversimplification.
They claim he deliberately downplays or just plain ignores a mountain of evidence for what they call the Great Enrichment, that unprecedented sustained rise in living standards across the globe, all to push a political argument.
All right, so this brings us to the final showdown, the big verdict. And the two conclusions about capitalism that come out of this debate, well, they could not be further apart. Is this thing a monster, or is it a marvel?
For those who find Beckert's history convincing, this quote pretty much sums it up. In their view, capitalism is this amoral, insatiable force. It's almost like a rogue AI that just consumes everything in its path for the sole purpose of accumulating more and more and more.
But for his critics, the book is a deeply flawed, politically motivated attack. They don't see it as a reliable history at all. To them, it's a polemic that just fundamentally misunderstands where modern prosperity and freedom actually came from. So what are we supposed to take away from all this? Well, this clearly isn't just some dusty academic squabble. It's a live debate about the operating system of our modern world. And what's clear is that the story of capitalism is far from settled. We're forced to confront the role of violence and the state and to grapple with this undeniable paradox, that this system has been a powerful engine of both incredible creation and immense destruction.
And that all boils down to this one last, really provocative question. Because how we answer it, how we choose to tell the story of capitalism's past, is going to directly shape what we believe is even possible for its future.